What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan from Cortex Labs, livecortex.com, where we sell nootropic products, testosterone enhancing products, courses on using nootropics, and otherwise male enhancement stuff. So look, let's talk about, I want to just discuss with you folks how I would start using nootropics if I was brand new. Like if I were to start over, meaning what I know now, if I took that from a brand new slate, kind of never having used nootropics, but knowing what I know after 15 years of using nootropics. So I think this would be interesting for a lot of classes of the audience that we have here. I think number one, folks that are brand new, that are maybe brand new to the channel, that are new to nootropics, you're going to get an idea in this video of how you should be looking at nootropics, right? To the best of your ability, because there's going to be a lot of information that I have that obviously you're missing. And then people that have been using nootropics for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, this might also actually be interesting to you because there may be some things that you can be doing in addition to what you're doing now to make your stacks better and to make your regimens make more sense. So let's just get right into it. I'll first say that over the years, the first major understanding for me that changed how I use nootropics and got me thinking there has to be some sort of methodology behind what I'm doing was learning to cycle, learning to switch between stacks. And this happened at year 3 or 4. It's hard for me to exactly remember. But I remember after, a good degree of time using nootropics and still benefiting from them, but running into inconsistency with stacks and then increasingly, I was just increasingly running into stacks that would hit really well one day and then stop hitting particularly well the next day, and it just puzzled me why that was happening. I finally learned that I had to build a bunch of stacks that were targeted to my brain at that time, which is another distinction. The brain sort of changes, and sometimes your epic stack is a moving target. It may change. And then switch between, stacks that I have built that were really, really effective for my brain. So that's kind of the first thing that, I recognize. So if I was brand new coming into nootropics, I would buy the lot of nootropic chemicals that we all typically talk about, and they're classically identified as nootropics. Every single one of the racetams, with the exception of phenylpiracetam, because that's hard to find these days. I'd have phenylpiracetam hydrazide as a replacement. I'd buy all of the choline sources, CDP choline, alpha GPC, choline bitartrate. I would buy any afanyl analogs I could get my hands on, so whether it was actual modafinil or it was adrafinil or L-modafinil or FL-modafinil or hydrafinil, I'd buy as many analogs as possible. I would buy some research chemicals. I'd get some PRL-853, I'd buy some 9-MEBC, I'd buy some energy compounds like acetyl L-carnitine, like teocrine, like theobromine, and like dynamine, and I'd buy some non-neurotransmitter modifying stuff as well, like alpha-lipoic acid, quercetin, and vinpocetine. And again, this is me knowing what I know now, how I would approach going into nootropics if I was brand new, but knowing what I know now. So the first thing I would do is I would either have a Google document with small little kind of Excel spreadsheet tables, where they're listed stack 1, stack 2, stack 3, stack 4, and so on, with a results section and an adjustment column or row. I always get tables mixed up, but I think it's an additional column. Yeah, with adjustments, the word adjustment on it. Or I'd have a big notebook, preferably a pretty big notebook with a bunch of lines on it where I would write it. If you're one of those people that needs to write stuff out, I just have an easier time sometimes reconsuming information back into my brain that I've spit out from my brain into writing, and then it's just, I don't know, I just kind of reconstitute it a little easier in my brain, so I like to write things down. But regardless, I have an online document system, or I'd have a notepad where I tracked stacks. And then I would begin the experimentation. The goal being to situate between 15 and 30 stacks, call it, that register really well with me, that aren't strictly dopaminergic, that aren't strictly cholinergic, that aren't strictly energy centered, that aren't strictly GABAergic, that aren't strictly serotonergic, that they're hitting different neurotransmitter systems, right? You know, in my 30 stacks, call it, I'd have, I don't know, 5 cholinergic stacks, you know, I'd have 5 dopaminergic stacks, I'd have some tandem cholinergic / dopaminergic stacks, I'd have some tandem cholinergic / energy producing stacks. Do you get the drift? I'd be diversifying the types of outcomes that I would want in my brain, because I recognize at 15 years now how useful that is. And then I would spend a lot of time executing a great degree of patience, which is something that folks really have to understand when, you know, trying to formulate their own stacks, in just really trying to, through the formulation, adjustment to finalization process, which you can really understand and nail down in the Nootropics Masterclass and the Nootropics God course. I mean, we touch on this stuff. Actually, we touch on it to a pretty large degree in the Nootropics Ground Zero video course too, but those latter courses are really where you learn how to do this. And it's very a critical step to learn, for the record. Like, if you're going into using nootropics and you don't know formulation and you don't know adjustment to perfection, you're gonna be wasting time. There's no way around that, because no one is actually talking about that type of methodology on Reddit or anywhere, and that's why a lot of them are sort of spinning their wheels. Nevertheless, I would be formulating stacks patiently, running the experimentation on the stacks, seeing how they affected me. I'd be writing notes about like how the stack was affecting my brain in terms of verbal fluency, mental energy, focus, working memory, productive drive, motivation. I would be writing all my negatives down. Oh, it made me tired after 2 hours, or tired right away. And those data points or feedback points would then drive my adjustments. I would make adjustments to each stack. I'd run the stacks again sometime a few days later to give time in between the stacks, right? Because, you know, the effect from a stack, if you change it, is going to be different, but it'll be certainly even more different and harder to read if you just took the stack the day before. You want to give yourself a break from the compounds that were in it and switch to another experimental stack. And I would basically run this experimental phase for what would probably take 2 months or so. Yeah, I mean, usually when I'm working with clients in a larger scale, ongoing capacity with these nootropics consulting programs, I mean, it's taking us 2 months to actually get there, to the point where we've got 30 stacks, 25 to 30 stacks situated that are targeted to that person's brain. Thereafter, it's just a matter of figuring out which stacks hit for which days and for which tasks that the person does, and then stack labeling and stack scheduling. But I would go through that 2-month process, well, call it 1 to 2 month process. I guess it's different for different people. It depends on how well the stack is formulated initially, which is why you sort of have to understand the contents of like the stuff that's in Nootropics Ground Zero, Nootropics Masterclass, Nootropics God course. And then I would just be building stacks, you know? And then obviously, like on the day-to-day in my life as a business person and as a fitness person and as an athlete kind of guy and whatever, like I'd be implementing my nootropic stacks into my life for productivity, kind of ongoingly monitoring how they're making me function, if some of them need to change, if my ideal doses have, you know, change, because it's somewhat of a moving target sometimes, and I'd be constantly kind of wanting to be up on that and maybe making adjustments moving forward, maybe not on certain stacks. I mean, there are certain stacks that when you've dialed them in, like they really don't change the efficacy. You know, I've got some modafinil-centered stacks, like modafinil, racetam, teocrine, theanine stacks that are just like the same dose every time. They affect me the same way. They turn the lights on and I really like it. The Torque stack is like that, by the way. Torque, our new nootropic stack, which will be launching, it looks, I got a date recently, by the way, and it's I think July 19th to the 21st is the completion date of Torque. So we're like right around the corner. But the Torque nootropic stack for me is like so heavy hitting and perfectly dialed in that I take that stack and I'm like, holy crap, I just want to attack the to-do list. And you guys probably will too, so look out for Torque launching probably late July, at the very latest, early August. I would be running nootropic stacks commensurate with my demand of productivity, unless my demand of productivity was so massive, and in terms of like quantities of days in the week, that it was pushing 6 to 7 days of the week, in which case, like, regardless, I would cycle off Saturdays and Sundays. And like every 2 or 3 weeks, I would probably cycle off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of just everything, giving a clean slate, letting the brain kind of normalize back to normal. If there are some receptor downregulation that may have occurred in that time period, at least you're giving your brain time to kind of regulate in that period. If there were overages in neurotransmitters, you're giving your brain time to regulate in that period, and you're just kind of coming to balance. So I would cycle in that manner. And then I guess lastly, knowing what I know now, the one major point that I want to get across to folks that are new and even folks that have been into nootropics that think they have a grasp of what's going on because maybe they're getting consistent results is like, if I had found, which I obviously would have in the first, couple weeks, month, 2 months, a really great stack that just like, man, really powerfully turns on every facet of brain function and to kind of like feel like this should be my go-to or something. I just want to rely on this stack exclusively. I would be wise and careful not to fall into that pit, right? Not to fall into that hole of thinking that, first of all, one stack is going to be all you're going to need, and that secondly, you should consistently take that stack. Because it's just going to frustrate you when eventually side effects come from it because of the neurotransmitter side you're not carefully using, you're not cycling appropriately. Or like when just generally it's not as consistent as it was and it starts to lose potency and you're wondering why, you're going to be frustrated when that happens. So like I would be careful to identify like when certain stacks were like really effective, not to keep taking just those stacks. That's a hole that a lot of people fall into because they're not savvy on the necessity to cycle and to be switching between neurotransmitter systems. And I guess lastly, I would end on that. I would be actively, consciously switching between acetylcholine modulating nootropics to dopamine modulating nootropics to adenosine receptor antagonizing nootropics to non-neurotransmitter modifying nootropics to mitochondrial optimization nootropics like LCAR and quercetin. I would be consciously switching between stacks and systems once I had developed through the proper formulation, the proper adjustment, the proper cycling, and the proper finalization of stacks. I'd be having them situated by systems. And that's essentially how I would approach it, okay? So what I just gave you was like the outline framework of how you should be using nootropics no matter what. Even if you're getting away with using the same stack, like maybe you're taking 2 stacks in a week and they're different from one another, but every week you kind of rely on 3 days of this stack and 2 days of that stack or something. Like ultimately you should be switching to developing higher quantities of stacks that register really well with you because you're gonna need to be switching between those stacks eventually, right? Because you're gonna run into tolerance issues, side effects, etc. It's just the nature of neurohacking and brain chemistry modification, right? You really can't get around that because that is how the brain works. So if you are brand new to using nootropics or you're a year in and you're not doing everything that I just said to do, then you definitely have to look, especially if you're in that latter category, you've got to look at what you're doing and start following the advice of what I just said. Why do people not do it? Well, because it requires more work, right? It's a little harder. It's a lot harder. I mean, it just requires more nuance and a good degree of your time actually spent on, employing the methodology into formulating better stacks, adjusting stacks correctly and having them all, cycled appropriately, via switching between neurotransmitter systems. And if you're brand new to nootropics, like you've got to approach it this way. Once you realize how beneficial they are and how good they make your brain perform, you're not going to want to go back to living your life without using nootropics to have the cognitive edge. I mean, there's just no question about that. And so you've got to approach it if you want that longer term sustainability in the ways that I've described in this video. So let me just explain a couple things. For those of you that are brand new to nootropics, so like you just started and you just came to this channel, first of all, thank you so much for being with me and being here in this channel. Comment for the algorithm because that helps more people come to the channel. And the first thing you should do is get the video course Nootropics Ground Zero. Nootropics Ground Zero. So if you're brand new, this is absolutely where you have to start, because it's a video course that I created. It's about an hour and 15 minutes that explains from the ground up how exactly to use nootropics, how to formulate nootropic stacks, how to adjust nootropic stacks, how to finalize nootropic stacks, inducing certain states on cue with nootropics, like motivation and focus and verbal fluency, like knowing which nootropics are actually going to target some of those brain states. That's what's really important about these video courses, and especially Nootropics Ground Zero. Look, it'll take you to the pro mark. That is defined as the 3-year mark in using nootropics. Or if you'd like to kind of skip that level and go to the highest level, the God level of using nootropics, then you would want to get the Nootropics God course, okay? This is the highest level, and there are some things in there that the course is going to assume that you know. So if you're brand new, you should start with Ground Zero, and then you could skip to the God course. But the God course shows you not only stacks for certain states, formulation, adjustment, and finalization at a much more advanced level, but like labeling stacks for what you actually do in terms of productive output throughout the day, which is really useful, because then you know, hey, like I'm just going to take this stack for Tuesdays because this stack turns my brain on for verbal fluency, and Tuesdays there's a lot of meetings. I'm going to take this stack for Fridays because I do a lot of analytical work on Fridays, and I've determined that this stack is really effective for that. And hosts of other like really high level, pro level distinctions. This course takes you to the 10 to 15 year mark in using nootropics. So get any one of those courses depending on where you are at livecortex.com. If you would like my help personally on formulating nootropic stacks, adjusting nootropic stacks, right? Finalizing nootropic stacks, then you can work with me ongoingly. We've got a bunch of different consulting options. One of them is an ongoing consulting. It's every month, it's a set fee, and you've got me designing your nootropics regimen. At the same time, some people just need to have my expertise on something. You know, experts are like, they have this sort of black box of information that typically non-experts are missing. I mean, that's what 10,000 hours of focusing on something and learning something like I have with nootropics does to a person. It gives them all of these sort of secrets, if you will, shortcuts, hacks, more in-depth professional strategies on using nootropics. And so like you may need that, which I can deliver in either a 25-minute call or an hour call to set you on the right path of figuring out why some stack is not hitting well, or how many stacks you need to adjust, or why you're not responding to this stack or that stack, and which direction you need to take kind of moving forward. So go book a call with me if you need my personalized help on situating nootropic stacks. These calls also apply to raising testosterone, to enhancing your sexual performance as a man, to enhancing your erection quality as a guy, which is really important. That's one of my specialties and something I really think is important for men, to PSSD, which is post-SSRI sexual dysfunction, something that I know a lot about, have been able to get guys out of and recover from, and can also give you very targeted key instructions on what you may need to do if you want to go at it alone. So you can book a consult with me at livecortex.com. We like to get you on the phone within 24 to 48 hours and sometimes sooner. I'm basically in a rush to get you on the phone because I know you don't like to wait, and neither do I. Okay, so when you book, get ready to actually be on the phone relatively soon so we can get stuff squared away. You guys know the Cortex nootropic stack. I mean, we're talking about dopamine, motivation, energy, the will to work, that desire to get a lot done. Like when I built the Cortex stack, I honestly knew that I had a gem of a stack. It was my go-to stack. Of course, switching between different stacks, but I wasn't even cycling a whole lot back then. And the Cortex stack just blew my mind. Like I would take it in the morning, I would take it with some coffee, and I'd go and build my previous business. And honestly, like the turning on of the brain, that necessary jolt to wakefulness and productive energy, like, you know, in the morning that everybody basically craves, and that if you get it, jumpstarts your day and you're a lot more productive. That's what the Cortex stack delivers. Not to mention though, verbal fluency. It makes you a lot more verbally fluent and able to sort of synthesize the stuff that's in your brain into like speech and the actual like deliverable word. It's very, very powerful in that regard. But who also doesn't want motivated mental energy, which is what Cortex delivers? I mean, any dopamine and cholinergic centered stack is going to do that. Just a quick rundown. We've got a perfect synergy of uridine monophosphate, a super nootropic, of CDP choline, which is going to give you more brain usable acetylcholine and modify dopamine receptors and slightly elevate noradrenaline, which is very useful for alertness. We've got artichoke extract stacked perfectly in the Cortex stack to turn on mental energy. In the onset of the stack, the artichoke extract in it made a wild difference in how the stack onsetted in terms of that noticeable, usable energy. And then we've got some Bacopa monnieri in there, which actually longer term contributes to the growth of axons and dendrites. It is fostering a better functioning brain over time. So not only do you get acute, powerful, positive benefits from Cortex, you also develop a better functioning brain over time. And that's why we put the ingredients together the way that we did. All right, so go get all that stuff at livecortex.com. That is Cortex Labs' official website. Thank you so much for being with me. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and hit the bell so that you can get notified of everything we do, because I pump out at least 2 videos a week and we're doing live streams galore these days, and there is so much more content to come. It's the performance season, baby. I'll talk to you guys soon.